Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 6 of the Nations Cup. Let's get this started. Your first braking point is going to be right after you pass the 150 meter mark. Brake in a straight line as much as you can, then slowly ease off on the brakes as you start to turn in. Turn in after the 50 meter mark and just be very patient with your throttle input. Then before you reach this pole with the phone sign on it, you want to use some braking so you can slow down a little bit while still having the flexibility to turn. Just focus on getting the car to rotate so you can start to accelerate earlier. Take these next 2 turns at full throttle. Even though the track is wet, there is still some grip to play around with, so don't turn in too much so you don't end up scraping the wall. Then just after the 100 meter mark, you want to brake hard for a moment, ease off on the brakes. Let the car cruise for just a moment, and when you hit the apex, carefully start to accelerate. Try to exit in as straight of a line as possible so you can get a fast exit and make sure you don't scrape the wall once again. Just after this bridge, you want to tap on the brakes, then do some throttle control. Same thing for this turn, but do it before you reach the 50 meter mark. Tap on the brakes, then do some throttle control. Right after the second to last sign up above, that is where you will start to brake. Brake hard for a moment, then slowly ease off on the brakes. Bring yourself to the right side of the track, then do some throttle control as you go through this left turn. Try to be patient with your throttle input so you don't scrape on the wall as I do in this turn. Look for the 150 meter mark as you'll brake right before you pass it. By braking here, it should take you right into this first apex and you can start to ease off on the brakes, which will then lead you to the second apex. Be very patient with your throttle input once more as you will be going down to first gear. Try not to have too much wheel spin as that will affect your exit speed. But anyways, that is all for this lap guide. Let's go ahead and talk about the strategies. For the qualifying session, you have 6 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. And chances are people are not going to be fuel burning as well. You're in a wet track, so you want to try to make the most out of the time you have and try to get as many laps in as you can. There is one thing that is going to be overly dominant, and that's going to be slipstream. So whatever people in your lobby do, make sure you join them as you want to stay behind someone and get all that slipstream benefits out of them. Make sure that you give yourself some space between yourself and the car ahead of you so you don't end up bumping them, especially when you're going through the twistier bits of the track. So as you approach the final hairpin on your outlap, make sure you are behind that person that you want to get the slipstream out of, as you want to get all the slipstream that you can from the beginning of the main straight on your outlap onto the end of the straight as you start your qualifying lap, and then once again from the last hairpin as you're completing your first qualifying lap, and then rinse and repeat until you run out of time. So without the slipstream, I'm usually going at about 170 miles an hour, but with the slipstream I'm going 182 miles an hour, so that's going to be a big difference, and it'll definitely show when you're doing your qualifying times. The same story should be with the Peugeot VGT, which I'll briefly discuss in a bit. And make sure that you try not to battle with anyone during your qualifying session, as that's going to mess up your qualifying times. And make sure that you don't mess up, especially when you're going through the twistier bits, as that could cause a chain reaction of people messing up and you're all just not going to be happy with each other. So a couple laps later, and again, this is just us going out of the pit stop and then pretty much just going for it right away. PR1 Fire was able to stay behind someone for the entire duration of the qualifying session and gets a low 206. Same thing with Zenit. He was behind someone for a majority of the qualifying session and was able to get a low 206 as well. And that shows you how strong the slipstream is. So make sure that you're behind someone. Give yourself space between yourself and the car ahead of you so you can engage in all that slipstream benefits and get yourself a lightning fast qualifying time. For the racing strategy, this is a no-stop race. You don't have to worry about the fuel, and for the tires, you don't really have to worry about the tire wear. Make sure you are on racing intermediates, as that is the best tire choice for this race. Now, as for the tire wear, I'm going to briefly go over it. It's not going to be something that you'll have to really worry about, but to make your life a little bit easier, what you want to do is bring the brake balance towards the front of the car. For both the Ford and the Peugeot, I had the brake balance at -4, so 4 points towards the front of the car. That way I can bring a little bit of that wear towards the front of the car and make sure that the rear tires don't get worn out too much. And the other thing is that the rear tires are going to get most of that tire wear from the final hairpin, as they're going all the way down to first gear. And then when you start to speed up as you exit the hairpin, you're going to be experiencing some of that wheel spin, which will bring in some of that tire wear. So bring the brake balance towards the front of the car, but overall it shouldn't be too much to worry about. Also, whenever you're behind someone and getting all the slipstream, make sure you brake a little bit earlier, especially as you're racing on a wet surface. So if you're braking at the 150 meter mark when there's no one ahead of you, then you want to brake a little bit before you reach that 150 meter board, so you don't end up punting the person ahead of you and they end up getting really mad at you. Now, in terms of the car choice, you basically have two choices I can choose from. Either the Ford GTL Inspector test car or the Peugeot VGT. With the Ford, it has a really high speed, but its acceleration is a little bit slower than that of the Peugeot. Now, one of the nice things about the Ford is that it's a bit more predictable, at least in my experience. It is a little bit more understeery, but when you're exiting out of the turns, especially the last hairpin, it doesn't want to do anything too crazy. You still have to be careful when you're accelerating out of the turns, obviously, but with its stability, it'll give you a bit more peace of mind. Now, with the Peugeot VGT, hopefully I'm saying that right, it has better acceleration, which will give it an easier time at reaching those high speeds, especially without the slipstream. However, this car is a bit more oversteery, which is both a good and bad thing. It's good because it'll help you rotate through some of the more twistier bits of the track more easily, but at the same time, it increases the risk of you spinning out, especially at the final hairpin. So if you're in the VGT, just take your time accelerating out of the turns, especially the final hairpin, so you can reduce the risk of getting too much wheel spin and potentially spinning out. Now, something I do want to touch on is bump drafting, which can be seen as controversial, especially with how the penalty system is right now. So the way that these two individuals do it and ended up getting like a 20-second lead over third place is the car in the back, he speeds up through the slipstream benefit, and if he's approaching the car ahead at a significantly faster speed, he's going to ease off the throttle a little bit so it can be more of a bump and not a shunt, which will potentially trigger the penalty system to award someone with a stupid penalty. So the car in the front is going to be bumped and is going to be going over 180 miles an hour. The car in the back will slow down a little bit as the energy is transferred from the back car to the front car, but because of how strong the slipstream is, the car in the back is going to quickly go back over 180 miles an hour, then give the car in the front a lovely little tap, and the cycle is going to repeat until they approach the first turn. So because of how OP the slipstream is, unless if the gap behind you is over 1.5 seconds, then you don't want to be in front of the pack. And the main reason is that when you're going through the main street for the final time to cross the finish line, the car in the front is going to be a sitting duck. The car in the back, they're going to have to slipstream, and it's going to easily give them the opportunity to pass the car in the front. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this guide. This guide actually went longer for usual. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA wishing you a good race. Don't slide around now. And I'll see you in the next video.